The moment Dr. Sampson said genetic marker inconsistent with paternal DNA, 20 years of marriage collapsed like a house built on sand. For 2 decades, I'd built a reputation as the contractor who never cut corners, who stood behind every beam and nail, who believed my marriage was constructed with the same integrity. The ultrasound screen showed my wife Angela's unborn child, a child that wasn't mine, while her face revealed not remorse, but irritation at being caught. My son Trevor waited in the lobby, 17, and already sensing something wrong in our family's foundation, unaware his world was about to shift beneath him too. What would you do when the life you've carefully built is revealed to be constructed on sand? For me, the answer wasn't in hasty demolition. Instead, I found it in something contractors understand better than anyone: methodical deconstruction that saves what's valuable and exposes what's corrupt. Because sometimes the only way forward requires tearing down what you thought would stand forever. I understand you want this finished for your daughter's wedding, Mr. Calloway, but proper foundation work can't be rushed, I explained, kneeling to inspect the subcontractor's concrete pour. The basement expansion had revealed issues typical of older homes, minor cracks that inexperienced builders might patch cosmetically, hiding problems that would resurface years later. See these air pockets? This entire section needs to be redone. The wealthy client sighed, checking his watch. His Italian loafers looked out of place amid the construction dust. Jared, surely there's a way to patch it. The reception is in 6 weeks, and we promised Patricia her dream venue would be ready. I stood, brushing dust from my knees, ignoring the protest from my lower back. At 52, these inspections took more effort than they once had, but I never skipped them. Too many contractors sent foremen for quality checks, but I believed in seeing with my own eyes. A rushed job fails twice, first in quality, then in reputation, I said, using one of my father's expressions that had guided my business philosophy. We'll work overtime, but we'll do it right. Your daughter will thank you when her children play in this space without water seepage or mold issues. Calloway's frustration melted into reluctant respect. That's why we hired Atkinson Construction. My brother said you were worth the wait, said you treated his renovation like you were building your own home. That's the only way I know how to build, I replied, making notes on necessary corrections. We'll still make your deadline, just not with shortcuts. As Calloway left, I checked my phone. A text from Angela. Special dinner tonight. Big news to celebrate. Don't be late. I smiled, pocketing the phone. 20 years of marriage, and she still knew how to pique my interest. Whatever the news, it would be good to focus on family after weeks of 12-hour days completing the Westridge development. Angela had been distant lately, mentioning feeling neglected during my busiest season. Tonight would be a chance to reconnect. Our 2-story colonial wasn't in the neighborhood where I built million-dollar residences, but I'd renovated every inch myself over the years. The front door opened to the aroma of Angela's rosemary chicken, a special occasion dish she'd learned from her grandmother and prepared only for celebrations. "Dad!" Trevor called from the dining room table, geometry textbook open beside his plate. His dark hair needed cutting, falling into eyes that had my seriousness, but Angela's warm brown color. "Can you explain complementary angles again? Mr. Davis makes it so complicated." "After dinner," I promised, catching Angela's eye as she emerged from the kitchen. She'd dressed up, the blue dress I'd given her for our anniversary, hair freshly styled. At 48, she remained striking, though subtle changes in recent months, designer clothes, more makeup, highlights in her hair, suggested a desire for renewal I hadn't fully registered until now. "You're actually on time," she said, kissing my cheek. Something in her smile seemed nervous, but I attributed it to whatever announcement was coming. Dinner passed with Trevor's school stories and my updates on the Callaway project. Angela seemed unusually interested in my business details, supplier relationships, bid amounts, project timelines, questions she rarely asked in such specificity. I answered openly, pleased by her engagement with my work. Finally, Angela set down her fork and reached for my hand across the table. Her fingers felt cold despite the warm kitchen. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. The words hung in the air like suspended dust motes. We'd discussed having another child for years, but had given up after multiple disappointments in our early 40s. Trevor's face cycled through surprise, embarrassment, and finally a tentative smile. Wow, Mom. I'm going to be a brother at my age?" "You'll be in college when the baby comes," Angela said, squeezing my hand tighter than necessary. "But you'll be an amazing big brother." I found my voice through the shock. "How far along?" 8 weeks, she replied, meeting my eyes with an intensity I couldn't interpret. "I have my first ultrasound next week." "I'll be there," I said immediately, a surge of protective joy cutting through my surprise. "I want to see everything from the beginning this time." A flicker of something, panic, crossed Angela's face. "The first one is just confirmatory. Maybe wait for the 12-week scan when there's more to see." I frowned slightly. "I was traveling so much with the Henderson project when you were carrying Trevor. I missed too many moments. I don't want to repeat that." "Of course," she agreed quickly, releasing my hand. "I just don't want you rearranging your schedule for routine appointments." Later that night, reaching for Angela's phone to check her calendar for the ultrasound date, I found the password had been changed from our anniversary date. When I mentioned it, she murmured something about security recommendations from her book club friend without meeting my eyes. "Everyone's doing it," she said, turning away. "Carol says we're too lax about digital security." I lay awake after she fell asleep, cataloging other small changes. New passwords, late-night texts she shielded from view. The sudden increase in business meetings that never appeared on our shared calendar. The designer clothes charged to our credit card from stores she'd previously called overpriced and pretentious. A knock interrupted my thoughts. "Dad?" Trevor stood in the doorway, sleep rumpled, but eyes alert. "Can I get a ride to school tomorrow? Mom said she has an early meeting with that Jennings guy again." "Marcos Jennings, the developer?" I asked, something cold settling in my stomach. "Yeah, she's been meeting him a lot lately. Says he might have some interior design work for her firm." Angela's interior design business was small, mostly friends and local clients. Marcos Jennings developed luxury properties throughout the county, projects far beyond Angela's typical scope. "When did these meetings start?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Couple months ago. She's been texting with him a lot too, always puts her phone away when I come in the room." Trevor hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "Just business," I assured him, forcing a smile. "Sure, I'll drive you." After he left, I stared at the ceiling, making a mental note to pay closer attention to Angela's schedule and her interactions with Marcos Jennings at the upcoming Builders Association event. The rational part of me dismissed my suspicions as ridiculous. Angela and I had built 20 years together. But like any experienced contractor, I'd learned to investigate even hairline cracks. They often revealed deeper structural problems beneath seemingly solid surfaces. Early morning light filtered through the blinds of my home office as I reviewed our bank statements. Angela still slept, giving me privacy to follow a hunch I hoped would prove unfounded. The first discrepancy appeared in March, an $8,000 withdrawal from our joint savings, with no corresponding expense in our household accounts. April showed a $12,000 transfer. Then in May, the most alarming, $25,000 from Trevor's college fund, labeled simply investment opportunity. Each withdrawal coincided with announcements from Jennings Development about new phases of their lakeside project. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Marcos Jennings had a reputation for courting investors when his cash flow tightened, a pattern I'd observed from keeping tabs on competitors. But why would Angela transfer funds without discussion? We'd always made financial decisions together. I checked the calendar where I'd marked Angela's business meetings based on Trevor's offhand comments. 8 meetings in 6 weeks, excessive for preliminary design consultations. 2 occurred on days when Jennings Development filed permit applications requiring significant fees. My coffee grew cold as connections formed like blueprint lines converging to reveal a pattern I didn't want to see. Professional experience had taught me to trust documentation over emotion, evidence over assumption. The evidence suggested a relationship beyond professional collaboration. I closed the laptop when I heard Angela stirring upstairs. Confrontation without complete information would only drive truth deeper underground. I needed more facts, the contractor's approach to any structural investigation. "You're coming tonight?" Angela asked, surprise evident as I adjusted my tie in our bedroom mirror. The Builders Association's quarterly event wasn't something I typically attended, preferring to send Earl, my foreman, as company representative. Thought I'd make an appearance. The Callaway project is generating buzz. I studied her reflection as she applied makeup with particular attention. "Marcos Jennings will be there, right? You mentioned he might have design work for you." Her hand paused imperceptibly before continuing to apply lipstick. "He usually attends. I'm not sure if we'll discuss business tonight, though." Angela seemed unusually nervous, checking her appearance repeatedly. She'd chosen her most expensive dress, the black designer piece with subtle beading that cost more than my first truck. Excessive for what she'd always called boring industry functions. "You look beautiful," I said sincerely. The observation seemed to increase rather than ease her tension. The hotel ballroom buzzed with contractors, architects, and developers. I spotted Marcos Jennings immediately, holding court with potential investors near the bar. At 37, he presented a polished image, designer suit, practiced charm, and the confidence of someone who'd never encountered consequences. His developments appeared impressive on surface inspection, modern designs with luxury amenities, but contractors gossiped about questionable material substitutions and inspection shortcuts. "Jared," he called, waving us over with unnecessary enthusiasm. "The man who builds like they did in the old days." The comment held a subtle barb, implying my methods were outdated rather than time-tested. Angela laughed too enthusiastically, standing slightly closer to Marcos than necessary. "Angela's been invaluable providing insights on interior trends," Marcos continued, his hand briefly touching her lower back in a gesture too familiar for professional acquaintances. "We modern developers need to balance innovation with some traditional elements. That's what I always say." The conversation flowed around me while I observed their interaction. The casual touches, the inside jokes, the way other attendees watched us with that peculiar mixture of curiosity and discomfort reserved for unwitting participants in public spectacle. Mike Peterson, another contractor, approached as Angela excused herself to the ladies' room. "Good work on the West Ridge development," he said, clapping my shoulder with an empathy that confirmed my suspicions. Listen, Jared, you might want to keep a close eye on your business interests these days. Competitive market. The warning wasn't subtle, but before I could press for details, Earl appeared at my elbow, tension evident in his normally relaxed demeanor. Boss, got a minute? Something you should know. In the relative quiet of the hotel bar, Earl shredded a napkin as he searched for words. 25 years my senior, when I'd apprenticed under him, he'd become my foreman after my business grew, our roles reversed by mutual respect. I don't know how to say this, he began, his 20 years of loyalty evident in his discomfort. There are rumors about Angela and Jennings. The sick feeling that had been building solidified. Tell me. They've been seen together, not just professional meetings. The Lakeview Inn, mostly. And, he hesitated, Jennings has been using information about your supplier contracts and bids to undercut Atkinson Construction on projects. The dual betrayal, personal and professional, hit like a structural failure during inspection. My marriage and my business, the two foundations of my life, simultaneously compromised. How long have people known? I asked, the public humiliation adding another dimension to the pain. A few months. Nobody wanted to be the one to tell you. We hoped it was just talk. Earl looked miserable. There's more. Her sister Claire has been covering for them, creating alibis for those supposed girls' weekends. The ripple effect of betrayal expanded. Not just Angela and Marcos, but Claire, who'd been part of our family gatherings for 20 years, who'd held Trevor as a newborn, who knew exactly what this would do to us. Thank you for your honesty, I managed. I needed to know. I drove home in silence, Angela following in her car. While she prepared for bed, I checked her vehicle. In the console, I found a hotel receipt dated during her supposed girls' weekend with Claire 3 weeks ago. The Lakeview Inn, just as Earl had said. The evidence was mounting, each discovery another crack in what I'd believed was solid ground. But I needed absolute certainty before confronting what increasingly appeared to be the collapse of my marriage. The ultrasound appointment scheduled for Thursday would either disprove my suspicions or confirm their full, devastating scope. That night, I lay awake cataloging warning signs I'd missed. Angela's increased criticism of my old-fashioned business approach, her sudden interest in development projects, her dismissal of family traditions as boring. The subtle erosion of respect had happened so gradually I'd normalized it, making excuses for her changing behavior rather than recognizing it as foundation damage. In construction, ignoring warning signs doesn't prevent collapse. It just ensures you're unprepared when it happens. I resolved not to make the same mistake with my marriage. The ultrasound would provide incontrovertible evidence, one way or another. The ultrasound room's clinical brightness contrasted with the darkness gathering inside me. Angela reclined on the examination table, her nervous chatter filling the silence as we waited for Dr. Sampson. I'd insisted on attending, despite her repeated attempts to dissuade me. "You really didn't need to rearrange your schedule," she said, for the third time, smoothing the paper gown over her still flat stomach. "These early appointments are so quick and technical." "I want to be here," I replied simply. Her increasing discomfort only strengthened my resolve. Dr. Sampson entered with a technician greeting us warmly. In her mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and a forthright manner, she'd been our family physician since Trevor's birth. "Ready to see your little one?" she asked, maintaining professional enthusiasm, though her eyes registered Angela's tension. The cold gel, the pressure of the wand, the grainy image forming on the screen, all proceeded with routine precision until Dr. Sampson's brow furrowed. You're 8 weeks along, correct? She asked, making measurements with practiced movements. Yes, Angela replied, avoiding my gaze. 8 weeks and 4 days. Dr. Sampson nodded slowly. The development is consistent with that timing, but I'm noticing something interesting with this genetic marker. She pointed to something indecipherable to me on the screen. It's inconsistent with paternal DNA. The room seemed to tilt. Medical terminology transformed into devastating clarity. What does that mean? I asked, already knowing. Well, certain genetic markers should reflect a combination of both parents, but this one... She looked between us, professional demeanor faltering as she registered the tension. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. The baby isn't mine, is it? My voice sounded distant to my own ears, as though coming through damaged drywall. Angela's face transformed, not with shame or apology, but irritation. Her eyes darted to the technician, then the doctor. Can we not do this here? Dr. Sampson cleared her throat. I'll give you a moment, she said, ushering the technician out with a discreet efficiency born of years managing difficult patient situations. In the vacuum they left behind, Angela grabbed a tissue, wiping the gel from her stomach with sharp, angry movements. You just had to make a scene. 20 years, Angela. The words felt inadequate against the magnitude of betrayal. Don't be dramatic. It's not like you've been the perfect husband. She dressed quickly, avoiding my eyes. Always working, always putting the business first. When was the last time you asked about my needs, my dreams? This isn't about our marriage's imperfections. It's about your choice to betray it rather than address issues. I stood, needing physical distance. Is it Marcos Jennings? Her momentary silence confirmed what I already knew. He sees me, she finally said, voice hardening. Not just as the contractor's wife or Trevor's mother, but as a woman with ambitions. You never understood what I needed. I walked out without another word, aware of the curious glances from the waiting room. Trevor sat thumbing through a magazine, looking up expectantly. His innocence, about to be collateral damage in his mother's choices, hit me with fresh pain. Everything okay? He asked, noting my expression. We need to go, I managed. Angela followed us to the parking lot, her voice rising as we reached my truck. So you're just going to walk away? Typical. When things get complicated, Jared checks out. I turned to face her, maintaining a distance that felt symbolic of the chasm that had opened between us. This isn't complicated, Angela. It's deliberate deception. You're carrying another man's child while married to me. Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing around the parking lot. Trevor's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. Mom? What's going on? Your mother has been having an affair, I said, choosing honest directness over protective lies. At 17, Trevor deserved truth, however painful. The baby isn't mine. Angela's fury turned on me. How dare you tell him like this? This is exactly your problem. No emotional intelligence, just cold facts. Is it Marcos Jennings? Trevor asked quietly, surprising us both with his perception. Angela's stunned expression answered before her words could. It's complicated, Trevor. Adult relationships. Save it, he interrupted, a hardness in his voice I'd never heard before. I've seen the texts when you leave your phone around. I just didn't want to believe it. This is between your father and me, Angela insisted. Don't take sides in something you don't understand. I understand loyalty, Trevor replied, moving to stand beside me, and respect. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling his slight trembling despite his brave front. "I'll be getting my things and staying at the office tonight. You're welcome to come with me." Trevor's choice to follow me to the truck spoke volumes. Angela stood alone in the parking lot, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling as we drove away. In my home office, Trevor sat at the computer, his expression hardening as he scrolled through messages I couldn't see. "You figured out her password?" I asked, packing essential documents. "It wasn't hard. It's his birthday." Trevor's voice cracked. "I've known something was wrong. I found texts a few weeks ago, but told myself I was misunderstanding." He turned the screen toward me. There they were, hundreds of messages between Angela and Marcos, including mocking references to me as the dinosaur for my traditional business practices and values. "They laugh about how you don't understand modern networking," Trevor said, disgust evident, "about how your honest reputation is quaint in today's market." I scanned the messages, each one cutting deeper than structural damage ever could. The woman who shared my bed, who'd built a life with me, reducing 20 years to contemptuous caricature. "She's been sharing your business information too," Trevor continued, opening another folder. "Bid amounts, supplier contracts, project timelines, everything Jennings would need to underbid you." The betrayal expanded beyond our marriage into my livelihood, the business I'd built to support our family, and eventually passed to Trevor. Angela had weaponized my trust professionally as well as personally. I sat at my desk, opened the leather-bound notebook I used for project notes, and began a methodical list: facts, evidence, dates. The contractor in me taking over when the husband in me couldn't function. "What are we going to do?" Trevor asked, looking younger than his 17 years. "We're going to handle this properly," I replied, continuing my documentation. "No shortcuts, no hasty demolition. When you find structural damage, you assess, plan, and then rebuild stronger." As I wrote, a strange calm descended. The worst had happened, yet I was still standing, and with that realization came the first blueprint for what would follow. Not a plan for revenge, but for recovery, rebuilding what mattered from salvageable materials, discarding what couldn't be trusted, and creating a new foundation that couldn't be compromised by the same weaknesses. Dawn broke as I reviewed contracts at the Atkinson construction office. The wall of completed project photos, 25 years of quality work, reminded me of what remained solid in my life despite personal collapse. Spread across the conference table, business records revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 6 months, we'd lost 5 bids to Jennings Development, projects we should have secured based on our reputation and relationships. Each lost contract corresponded with Angela's business meetings with Marcos. More damning were the material substitutions in Jennings's recent projects. He'd used suppliers I'd specifically researched and vetted, undercutting my bids with information only Angela could have provided from my home office files. The Westridge development had nearly gone to Jennings until the client specifically requested Atkinson construction based on previous work, a project Angela wouldn't have known about. The estimated financial damage to my company exceeded $400,000 in lost contracts. The damage to my professional reputation, contractors whose livelihood depended on Atkinson Construction's continued success, was incalculable. Earl arrived at 6, concern etched in his weathered face. "Trevor called me last night. You both okay?" "Getting there," I replied, appreciating his direct approach. "I need to understand the full scope of damage to the business." "Team's with you, Jared, every one of us." He examined the bid documents I'd assembled. Jennings has been throwing around inside information at supplier meetings too. Made us look vulnerable. That ends today. I gathered the most critical documents. I'm meeting with Victoria Chen at 9. She's handled construction litigation for Henderson Properties. Good choice. Tough, but fair. Earl hesitated. What about Angela? One problem at a time, I replied, though my calm exterior masked the churning beneath. Business protections first. My phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. Mr. Atkinson. This is Catherine Reeves from the Environmental Compliance Office. I'd like to discuss some concerns about recent development projects in the county. Are you available to meet today? The timing seemed more than coincidental. May I ask what specific projects you're investigating? The lakeside development primarily, though we're seeing concerning patterns across multiple sites. I understand you've worked in the area for many years. Your perspective would be valuable. An hour later, I sat across from Catherine in a diner overlooking Jennings's lakeside development. Mid-40s, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who took regulations seriously, she spread photographs across the table. These show concerning patterns across multiple Jennings projects, she explained, indicating aerial shots taken over several months. Improper runoff management, questionable fill material, and potential wetland encroachment. Unfortunately, we lack sufficient documentation for official action. You're hoping I have information, I surmised. She nodded. As an established contractor familiar with local regulations, you might recognize violations others would miss, particularly this substitution of permeable materials. She indicated a specific photo showing a concrete pour where permeable pavers had been specified in approved plans. I recognized it immediately. The exact substitution Angela had texted Marcos about from my supplier contacts. The text had included proprietary information about special pricing I'd negotiated over years of reliable business. The cost difference between these materials represents about $380,000 across the development, Catherine noted. Significant profit enhancement at environmental expense. I may have relevant documentation, I said carefully, but I need to handle this methodically. This isn't just about business competition. Catherine studied me, professional assessment shifting to human understanding. Take the time you need. Some situations require both professional and personal consideration. The synchronicity couldn't be ignored. Angela's betrayal had exposed not just marital infidelity, but potentially criminal business practices. Justice might come through channels I hadn't anticipated. Returning to my temporary apartment above the workshop, I found Trevor with additional boxes from home. The space was small, a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchenette. I'd built for occasional use during intense project phases, but it offered immediate shelter from the emotional storm. Found this while packing your desk, he said, handing me a legal document I hadn't seen in months. It was from James Harwood, my mentor and former business partner who died the previous year. In the aftermath of his death and funeral, I'd filed his bequest without fully processing it. Partial ownership of an industrial property near the river, directly adjacent to Jennings's most ambitious development phase. The executor called twice last month, Trevor added. Mom said she'd give you the messages. Another deliberate omission. The property's location made it potentially crucial to Jennings's expansion plans, a leverage point Angela had kept hidden. This could be valuable, Trevor observed, displaying a maturity beyond his years, especially since Mom and Jennings don't know about it. I looked at my son with newfound appreciation. You've been paying attention to more than I realized. Trevor nodded solemnly. I've been documenting things for months. Mom's schedule changes, phone calls, missing money from my college account. Something felt wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. The revelation that Trevor had been carrying this burden alone, protecting me while processing his own suspicions, added another dimension to Angela's betrayal. She'd compromised not just our marriage, but Trevor's sense of security and family. "I'm sorry you've been carrying this alone," I said, regret mixing with pride in his character. "I'm not alone anymore," he replied. "We're figuring it out together." That afternoon, I called Victoria Chen to expand our meeting agenda beyond business protections to include divorce proceedings. The industrial property would need careful handling, both as protection against Angela's financial claims and potential leverage regarding Jennings' development. I spread construction blueprints beside the legal documents, the parallel both painful and clarifying. In building and in life, understanding the complete structural situation was essential before implementing solutions. "First step in any repair," I told Trevor, who watched me work with keen interest, "is a thorough assessment of the damage. Then we secure what's worth saving before addressing what's compromised." With that principle guiding us, we began planning not for revenge, but for recovery of our financial security, our dignity, and our future. Where Angela and Marcos had operated through deception, we would proceed with transparent purpose. Where they had cut corners for immediate gain, we would build properly for lasting results. The contractor's approach to structural failure would guide our response to personal betrayal. Assess honestly, plan methodically, rebuild stronger. "Most clients want immediate revenge," Victoria Chen observed, reviewing the documents I'd organized chronologically in a contractor's portfolio. "You're thinking 10 steps ahead." I'd selected Victoria as my attorney for her reputation for thoroughness rather than aggression. Her office, like her approach, was methodical and precise. No grand paintings or intimidating furniture, just efficient tools for effective outcomes. "Revenge won't secure Trevor's future or protect my business," I explained. "I need proper legal structures in place before Angela realizes I'm aware of the full situation." Victoria nodded approvingly. "The industrial property from your former partner provides significant leverage. It's not included in marital assets since it was inherited after marriage, and its location adjacent to Jennings's development makes it particularly valuable." "How valuable?" I asked. "Based on current zoning and Jennings's public development plans, it's essentially a keystone property for his next phase. Without access rights across this parcel, his luxury lakefront units lose their primary selling point, direct water views." The irony wasn't lost on me. While Angela and Marcos undermined my business, James Harwood's final gift had provided unexpected protection. "Can we secure the business assets and Trevor's remaining college funds before confrontation?" "Yes, but we'll need to move quickly. I'm concerned about the funds already transferred to Jennings's projects. If his financial situation is as precarious as you suspect, recovery becomes more difficult with each passing day." Victoria outlined a comprehensive strategy: business asset protection, financial account security, and evidence documentation for both divorce proceedings and potential regulatory action. Her approach matched my own professional methodology: measure twice, cut once. I left with an organized plan and timeline. Checking my phone, I found 7 missed calls from Claire, Angela's sister. This confrontation was inevitable, so I messaged her to meet at Riverfront Coffee, a public location where emotional outbursts would be constrained. "You've always been controlling," Claire began, before I'd even seated myself across from her. Her styled blonde hair and designer sunglasses matched her sister's recent aesthetic shift. Angela deserves happiness after years of being stifled by your old-fashioned expectations. I remained silent, observing how Claire's righteousness masked her discomfort. Several regular customers watched discreetly, the small-town audience to our family drama. She's finally found someone who appreciates her creativity and ambition, Claire continued, tapping manicured nails against her coffee cup. Someone who lives in this century. If you had any decency, you'd make this transition easy instead of forcing her to fight for every penny she deserves. What exactly does she deserve, Claire? I asked quietly. The money she's been transferring to Marcos without discussion? Trevor's college fund? Claire faltered. That's her money, too. You're probably hiding assets like all husbands do. She told me how you control all the finances. We've had joint accounts for 20 years. She's had complete access and transparency. I placed the bank statements on the table, each withdrawal highlighted with dates and amounts. These aren't business expenses or household necessities. These are investments in Jennings' development made without my knowledge while Angela and Marcos worked to undermine my company. Claire's self-righteousness crumbled as she scanned the evidence. She said you were financially abusive, that you restricted her access to money. Did she explain why she needed your help creating alibis for her hotel meetings with Marcos? Why the pregnancy needed to be presented as mine? Each question landed like a hammer driving a nail. Did she tell you they've been laughing about deceiving me, or that they've used my business information to undercut Atkinson Construction? Claire had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know about the business part or the pregnancy. I thought it was just an affair that would run its course. Just an affair, I repeated, the words bitter. 20 years of marriage reduced to just an affair. And you helped her. She's my sister, Claire said weakly. She said she was unhappy. And Trevor? Were you thinking about him when you helped destroy his family's foundation? As Claire gathered her purse to leave, a well-dressed woman approached our table. Mr. Atkinson, I'm Vanessa Jennings. I believe we have mutual concerns to discuss. Vanessa carried herself with the practiced poise of someone accustomed to maintaining appearances, but stress showed in the tightness around her eyes. Slim, elegant, and approximately Angela's age, she represented the polished image Marcos cultivated in his professional life. I know about Marcos and your wife, she said without preamble once Claire had departed. It's not the first time, but it's the most serious. He's planning to leave once the Lakeside project secures final funding. I'm sorry, I offered, recognizing genuine pain beneath her composed exterior. I'm not here for sympathy. She slid a manila envelope across the table. These are financial records showing environmental mitigation funds that were documented but never spent. There's also evidence of improper fill material and contamination cover-up at previous sites. I examined the documents. Detailed financial transfers, material substitution records, and regulatory filing discrepancies spanning 3 years and 4 development projects. Why are you showing me this? Because Marcos plans to leave me with nothing after 20 years of marriage, she replied, a flash of anger breaking through her controlled demeanor. Meanwhile, he's using your wife's money, your money, to salvage the Lakeside project while hiding assets offshore. I'm not going down with his ship, and I don't think you want your family's financial future destroyed either. I studied the documents, recognizing that Vanessa's betrayal of Marcos mirrored Angela's betrayal of me. Yet I couldn't deny the evidence's value in protecting innocent parties, homeowners with environmental hazards on their properties, investors misled about project specifications, employees whose livelihoods depended on Atkinson Construction's survival. "I'd like to connect you with someone from environmental compliance," I said finally. "These records could help protect innocent parties from harm." "I have nothing to lose at this point," Vanessa replied. "Marcos has made certain of that." As we arranged a meeting with Catherine Reeves, I realized the justice I sought extended beyond my own situation. Marcos Jennings had created a pattern of exploitation, of regulations, investors, his wife, and now my family. The appropriate response wasn't personal vengeance, but systematic accountability. When I returned to the workshop that evening, Trevor had organized his own findings: text messages, calendar inconsistencies, financial records, with a methodical approach that mirrored my own. "I talked to Earl today," he said. "He's been tracking the jobs we lost to Jennings. There's a pattern of him using our exact numbers, but coming in just under our bids." "You'd make a good detective," I observed, "or a contractor." Trevor smiled slightly. The first I'd seen since the ultrasound. I learned from the best. As we developed our plans, I realized that Angela and Marcos had underestimated us both. Their deception relied on our continued ignorance, on Trevor being too absorbed in teenage life to notice patterns, on my trust remaining blind even when presented with evidence. Their miscalculation would become our advantage. Like any sound construction project, our response would proceed with precision, patience, and proper preparation. The Environmental Protection Agency's regional office felt appropriately formal for the evidence we presented. Catherine Reeves led the meeting with 3 officials whose serious expressions reflected the scope of potential violations. "These documents show a pattern across multiple development sites," I explained, indicating maps where Jennings projects overlapped with protected watersheds. "The substitution of non-permeable materials here, and here," I pointed to specific locations, "violates runoff management requirements and threatens downstream water quality." "You're certain about these material substitutions?" asked the senior official, a gray-haired man with reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the documentation. "Yes." As a contractor, I recognize the difference between permeable pavers, specified in approved plans, and the standard concrete actually installed. The cost difference represents approximately $380,000 in materials alone. "And these financial records?" The official turned to Vanessa, who sat with perfect posture despite visible strain. "Environmental mitigation funds were documented for regulatory approval, but diverted to other uses," she confirmed. "I can provide account access demonstrating the discrepancies. My husband created separate books for investors versus regulatory filings." Catherine interjected, "The pattern extends beyond environmental concerns. We've identified potential fraud in permitting processes and misrepresentation to investors." "What's your interest in this matter, Mr. Atkinson?" asked a younger official. "You're a competitor of Jennings Development." "I'm providing information that affects public safety and environmental compliance," I replied evenly. My personal circumstances became intertwined with these issues when I discovered them, but my goal is appropriate regulatory enforcement, not competitive advantage. After 2 hours of detailed review, the officials reached their decision. "We'll launch a full investigation with expedited timeline due to public safety concerns," the senior official announced. "The evidence is compelling enough to warrant immediate action, including possible criminal charges if these documents are verified." As the meeting concluded, a news alert appeared on an official's phone. "Breaking. Developer Marcos Jennings under investigation." "That was fast," Catherine murmured. "Someone at the permitting office must have tipped off the press," the senior official replied. "This will complicate matters." Leaving the building, I felt no vindictive satisfaction, only the solemn relief of addressing a structural problem through proper channels. Personal revenge would have provided momentary emotional release, but potentially compromised legitimate investigation. This approach secured justice through systematic accountability. Word traveled quickly through Lakeside Village, where I supervised repairs on the Henderson residence. Workers and clients discussed the news reports while I maintained my normal routine, neither confirming nor denying my involvement. "Always thought there was something off about those Jennings projects," Mr. Henderson commented, watching his kitchen renovation progress. The Riverside condos started showing water damage after just 18 months. Cutting corners catches up eventually. Trevor, helping during school break, overheard the conversations with a newfound maturity. "People are finally seeing the truth," he observed quietly, measuring trim pieces with careful precision. "Truth has a way of emerging," I replied. "Our job is to focus on quality work that stands on its own merit." The calls and messages of support from colleagues and clients provided validation after months of private humiliation. My phone rang constantly, including a call from Victoria that Angela was contesting all financial arrangements after Marcos's assets were frozen by regulators. "She's claiming no knowledge of his business practices," Victoria reported. "Says she was manipulated as an investor and wants protection for her funds, including what she transferred from your accounts." "What's your recommendation?" "Proceed with the separation filing immediately. Her financial entanglement with Jennings strengthens our position regarding dissipation of marital assets." As I prepared to leave the site, I noticed a woman examining renovation plans for the Henderson's kitchen addition. Mid-40s with practical clothing and an observant gaze, she introduced herself as Pearl Morgan, recently returned to Lakeside Village to settle her parents' estate. "Mr. Henderson speaks highly of your work," she said. "I'm considering updates to my family home before selling. Do you have time to provide an estimate?" "I've gotten pickier about which projects I take on," I admitted, "but I'd be happy to look at what you're considering." The interest in her eyes went beyond professional consultation, but unlike Angela's relationship with Marcos, this connection began with transparency and appropriate timing. No hidden agendas, no secret meetings, just straightforward human connection. "I'd be happy to take a look next week," I replied, aware that one chapter of my life was ending while another possibility emerged. The conference room at Victoria's office provided neutral territory for what I hoped would be our final negotiation. Angela looked markedly different. The polished appearance she'd maintained throughout our marriage now frayed at the edges. The frozen assets of Jennings' development had clearly affected her financial situation. "I'm entitled to half of everything," she began immediately. "The house, the business, all accounts." Victoria responded with calm precision. "Mrs. Atkinson, your documented transfer of marital assets to Jennings' development without consent constitutes dissipation under family law. Additionally, the evidence of intentional business sabotage creates further complications for your position." "I didn't know what Marcos was doing with my information," Angela protested, the familiar pattern of deflecting responsibility emerging. "He manipulated me." "The text messages we've recovered suggest otherwise," Victoria replied, placing a folder on the table. "Your explicit awareness of how the information would be used to undermine Atkinson Construction is clearly documented." Angela's lawyer, a young man who seemed increasingly uncomfortable, whispered something in her ear. Her expression shifted to the familiar pattern: shock, defensive anger, then calculated appeal to emotion. "Jared, we had 20 years together," she said, softening her voice and leaning forward. Whatever mistakes I've made, don't you think that counts for something? We can work through this. I met her gaze directly. It counted for everything, Angela. That's why we're here. The meeting proceeded with detailed discussion of asset division, Trevor's college fund restoration, and communication boundaries moving forward. Throughout the process, I maintained emotional distance from Angela's alternating tactics of hostility and appeal. Her final attempt came as we prepared to leave. "I did love you once," she said softly. "That's not relevant to these arrangements," I replied, signing the final document. Outside the building, a newspaper headline caught my attention. "Jennings arrested on multiple charges." The systematic accountability I'd sought was unfolding through proper channels, without personal vendetta. The satisfaction felt clean, justice rather than revenge. Walking to my truck, I realized the difference between demolition and deconstruction. Demolition destroys indiscriminately, leaving only rubble. Deconstruction carefully preserves what's valuable while removing what's compromised. Angela and Marcos had attempted demolition of my life. I had responded with methodical deconstruction of their deception, salvaging what mattered most: my relationship with Trevor, my business integrity, and my capacity for measured response to betrayal. 2 years later, the expanded offices of Atkinson Construction reflected the company's growth, despite initial setbacks. New project boards displayed recent work, including environmentally sustainable developments that had become our specialty following the Jennings case. Trevor, now 19, wore the company logo on his shirt as he reviewed plans with our newest employee. College textbooks sat on his desk. He'd chosen to balance business administration studies with hands-on work in the family company. "We'll use permeable pavers throughout this section," he explained, indicating drainage patterns with confidence born of understanding rather than mere instruction. "Costs more up front, but saves the client on stormwater management and complies with updated watershed regulations." I observed with quiet pride. Trevor had deferred full-time college to work with me, discovering a natural talent for the business I'd built. The betrayal that might have destroyed our family had instead strengthened our bond. "Mr. Rodriguez is celebrating 5 years with us today," Trevor reminded me. I ordered lunch for the team. Rodriguez had stayed loyal during our darkest period, when Jennings's sabotage temporarily cost us contracts. Now our reputation for integrity had attracted clients specifically seeking ethical builders. "Mr. Atkinson?" my assistant interrupted. "Pearl Morgan is here about the Williams renovation." Pearl entered carrying lunch containers. "I thought I'd join the celebration," she said. "Just as friends, of course." The warmth in her eyes belied the just friends qualifier. Over 2 years, our relationship had developed slowly and thoughtfully, mutual respect forming a foundation neither rushed nor taken for granted. As a widow returning to her hometown, Pearl understood the careful reconstruction required after loss. Her practical nature and direct communication style were refreshing after years of Angela's manipulations. "Trevor and I were about to drive past the old Jennings development," I said. "Want to join us?" The remediation work is nearly complete. The site that had once showcased Marcos Jennings's corner cutting now demonstrated proper environmental restoration. Young contractors listened attentively as I explained correct watershed management techniques. The original plans actually specified these procedures, I noted, indicating the water retention systems being installed. Cutting corners on environmental protection ultimately costs more in remediation than doing it correctly from the start. "Is it true Jennings is still in prison?" asked one of the younger workers. Trevor nodded. 3-year sentence for fraud and environmental violations. His investors lost millions. What Trevor didn't mention was the broader impact. Homeowners discovering contamination issues on previous Jennings properties, banks foreclosing on over-leveraged developments, subcontractors left with unpaid invoices. The consequences had rippled through the community, affecting far more people than just our family. Was it worth it? Another contractor gestured to the extensive remediation. Exposing all this, given the personal cost? The question gave me pause. The past 2 years hadn't been easy. Angela struggled as a single mother with limited financial resources. Marcos served his sentence while his developments underwent costly corrections. My own journey through divorce and rebuilding had demanded every ounce of resilience I possessed. Integrity isn't measured by whether it's convenient, I answered finally. It's about building something that lasts, whether it's a structure or a life. The foundation matters most, even though it's the part nobody sees when the project is finished. Trevor added, and sometimes you have to tear down what's damaged to rebuild properly. The young man nodded thoughtfully. My father always said there are no shortcuts in quality work, but I didn't fully understand until now. As we prepared to leave, Trevor mentioned that Angela had reached out recently, the first communication beyond necessary co-parenting logistics in months. She apologized, he said carefully, not for everything, but for how she handled things with me. Said she's been doing some reflection. I nodded, neither dismissing the importance of this development nor overestimating it. That's a start. She asked about visiting during semester break. Would that be okay? That's between you and her, I replied. Your relationship with your mother is separate from what happened between us. Trevor's relieved expression confirmed I'd said the right thing. Despite everything, he needed to maintain connection with Angela. Maturity meant recognizing that reality, rather than demanding he choose sides permanently. Later, at dinner with Pearl and Trevor, watching them discuss his college plans for the following year, I recognized that the painful deconstruction of my former life had created space for something more authentic. The blueprints for this new foundation emphasized transparency, respect, and boundaries, elements that had been missing from my marriage to Angela. Pearl caught my thoughtful expression. Everything okay? Better than okay, I replied. Just appreciating proper construction when I see it. Dad's getting philosophical again, Trevor teased, but his smile held understanding. Pearl nodded. Good buildings and good relationships follow similar principles. Strong foundations, honest materials, regular maintenance. And knowing when repairs are worth making versus when to start fresh, I added. The conversation shifted to renovation details for the Williams project, but the underlying truth remained. We were building something new, not a replacement for what was lost, but a different structure entirely, designed with the wisdom of experience and the care that comes from recognizing true value. That night, reviewing project plans in my home office, a new home, smaller, but entirely mine, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 2 years. The betrayal that could have destroyed me had instead revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. The business that might have faltered had instead specialized and grown. The relationship with my son that could have become collateral damage had deepened into partnership. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was solid, authentic, and built to last. Like any well-constructed project, it would require ongoing maintenance and occasional renovations. But the foundation, the part invisible to casual observation but essential to structural integrity, was stronger than ever before. In building and in life, what matters most are the elements nobody sees once the project is complete. The quality of materials beneath the surface, the precision of measurements, the integrity of every connection, these determine whether a structure withstands the inevitable storms and stresses of time. My years as a contractor taught me to recognize warning signs, to investigate hairline cracks before they become structural failures. Yet, in my own marriage, I'd overlooked the subtle indicators of foundation problems until the collapse was imminent. Perhaps we all have blind spots when it comes to those closest to us, preferring comfortable illusion to uncomfortable truth. The particular pain of betrayal at midlife comes from the sense that starting over requires more energy than we might possess. The foundation we believed would support us through retirement suddenly proves unstable, and the prospect of rebuilding from scratch feels overwhelming. Yet I discovered that second acts built on truth can be more satisfying than first acts founded on illusion. In the aftermath of Angela's betrayal, I found that what remained solid, my relationship with Trevor, my professional integrity, my capacity for careful planning, provided sufficient foundation for reconstruction. The painful dismantling created space for new connections built on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. The construction principles that guided my professional life ultimately saved my personal one. Inspect thoroughly before proceeding. Use quality materials even when they cost more. Measure twice and cut once. Address problems directly rather than cosmetically covering them. And perhaps most importantly, recognize that proper building takes time. There are no legitimate shortcuts to lasting results. For those experiencing their own foundation problems, whether through betrayal, loss, or simply the recognition that what once worked no longer does, I offer this. The courage to examine structural damage honestly is the first step toward authentic reconstruction. The process requires patience, precision, and proper tools, but results in something stronger than what existed before. Perhaps you're noticing hairline cracks in your own foundation, patterns of disrespect, financial discrepancies, emotional disconnection. The contractor in me urges you not to ignore these warning signs out of fear or habit. Addressing problems fundamentally rather than cosmetically requires courage, but yields structures stronger than before. The blueprints for my rebuilt life emphasize quality over appearance, substance over facade. Lessons hard won, but worth the cost. Because in the end, true security comes not from what we construct, but from how we construct it.